Today we honor Lyman Wight Porter and his three families. Lyman Wight Porter was born May 5, 1833, at Independence, Jackson County, Missouri. He was the son of Sanford Porter Sr. and Nancy Warner. The family had moved from Peoria, Illinois, a few months before he was born. His parents and family, including three married children, were among the first to embrace the gospel. They passed through the persecutions and hardships the saints were called upon to endure. On the 12th of November, 1833, the family was driven from their newly made home at Independence and camped on the south bank of the Missouri River with no immediate way of making a crossing, and the mob still in pursuit under pledge to kill every man, woman, and child.
A heavy storm came up just as the guards said the mob was near, but before their attack the storm broke in such fury the mob left. The saints felt it was a miraculous deliverance by the hand of God. After the storm ceased, the river was crossed, but not with the main body of saints. A few of the saints traveled the South Fork for some distance. About 15 families decided to stop for the winter. During the winter of 1833-34, land was cleared and houses built. In the year 1839, they moved to Montrose, Lee County, Iowa. When Lyman was 8 years old, his brother, 5 years older than he, Justin Theodore, was killed by a horse falling on him. Lyman was very lonely, as his parents had lost 2 babies before that, and the other children were grown. Lyman was baptized in June of 1841 when 8 years of age.
Shortly after the martyrdom of the prophet and Hiram, a meeting was called to choose a new president for the church, and those who were at the meeting testified to seeing Joseph Smith and hearing his voice in the person of Brigham Young when he arose to speak. The people willingly voted him to lead the church. Soon after this, they began preparations for the long journey west. During the winter of 1845-1846, Nauvoo was a busy workshop of 15,000 people preparing to migrate west. In 1847, President Young wrote from winter quarters the following instructions to the saints.
Come immediately and prepare to go west, bringing with you all kinds of choice seeds, grains, vegetables, fruits, shrubbery, trees, and vines, everything that will please the eye, gladden the heart, or cheer the soul of man. Also the best stock of birds, beasts, or fowl of every kind. Also the best tools of every description, machinery for spinning and weaving, and the same of all kinds of farming utensils, and every implement and article within your knowledge that shall tend to promote the comfort, health, happiness, or prosperity of any people. In 1846, the Porters with other saints were expelled from Illinois. They settled for a time at Winter Quarters, Nebraska, now called Florence, Douglas County, Nebraska. Lyman was then 13 years of age. The next year, 1847, the family crossed the Great Plains to the Salt Lake Valley in the Charles C. Rich Company, locating first at Mill Creek, Salt Lake County. Lyman was then 14 years of age. They remained in Mill Creek 2 years. Then in 1849, they with other families decided to settle a few miles north of Salt Lake as the ground looked very productive and a fine stream of water came from a nearby canyon. They named the place Centerville.
Ozias Kilbourne and Electa Grantier came to Centerville about the same time. Their daughter, Electa Mariah, and Lyman became interested in each other and were married and endowed November 5, 1852, in the council house at Salt Lake City. Lyman was 19 and Electa Mariah 17 years of age, she having been born October 25, 1835 at Canton, Bradford County, Pennsylvania. Lyman received his patriarchal blessing May 3, 1853, from Patriarch John Smith at Salt Lake City, and was ordained a 70 February 23, 1857, by Jesse Haven. By this time enough families had settled there to organize a ward. Lyman's father, Sanford Sr., was chosen as bishop. He was always so kind and thoughtful of the poor that he would help them in many ways, and since he and his wife were both hard workers and good managers, they always had enough to help others. Lyman and Mariah stayed and helped his father on the farm as he was getting too old to swing the scythe for cutting hay, to use a sickle or cradle, and to cut grain or to bind it into bundles. In 1856, Lyman was one of the heroic party sent to rescue the belated and suffering handcart companies.
In 1857, word was received by the settlers that Johnston's army was coming to exterminate them. President Young called a council of all presiding authorities, and a prayer meeting was held. After this, President Smith organized a militia. Daniel H. Wells was made general over the little army that went forth into Echo Canyon in the winter of 1857-58. Lyman was with this little army out in the snow all winter. Porter Rockwell and his partner Lot Smith picked 15 men for scouts. Lyman was one of them. These scouts were hard at work all winter. The men used for musical instruments camp pans, tin pans tied to dry rawhides, and baked oven lids rubbed together, and they would all join in a song of lusty yells. The program was to draw as near as possible to the army camp, then start the music and put spurs to their mules or horses, and ride over to the sleeping tents while the snow and wind was coming so thick a horseman could not be seen a few steps away. Then they would ride over to the herd grounds and stampede their mules and beef cattle, and keep them going until another party would take them, while the scouts withdrew to higher ground, from where, as soon as the storm had ceased, they watched the movements of the soldiers through their glasses. They saw a squad of soldiers wallowing through the snow, but going in the opposite direction to the scouts, who went to their camp to rest and enjoy a piece of beef and get fixed for another party. To use Lyman's own words, it was plain to be seen that the God of heaven was taking care of the United States Army. He had sent so much snow and cold that it froze the fight right out of them. Lyman's brother Sanford discovered a little valley about 5 miles from Morgan while helping to guard Johnston's army in the fall of 1857 or spring of 1858. There was a fine stream of water running through the valley and low hills on the east with grass and timber. The land on the west side was about 15 feet higher than the east side, and all the land looked productive. In 1859, Sanford and his eldest brother Chauncey made a road up into the canyon above the valley and built a sawmill. They called the canyon Hardscrabble. The mill was run by water power, and by working early and late, they could cut out 300 or 400 feet of lumber a day. This made it possible to build their log homes and have wood floors and lumber on the roof to hold the dirt, so that in 1861 and 1862 the father, Sanford Sr., Lyman, and 3 brothers built homes and moved their families into the valley. They went hard to work putting in their crops. They cut the wild grass using the scythe, raking it with their homemade rakes, and that with the wheat they raised fed their teams and a few cows. They had to take the grain to Salt Lake to have it ground into flour. This was always a long, hard trip, as the roads at that time were practically impassable.
Wild currants and gooseberries grew along the creek bank, chokecherries, service berries on the hills which they gathered to help with their food supply. Quoting from the writings of his daughter Nancy Porter Moffett, when the valley was now called Porterville was discovered, it was a beautiful place covered with grass, and many colors and kinds of wildflowers grew on the low hills. Deer, wild chicken, and rabbits were plentiful, making it a very profitable place for the Indians to come. While the men hunted, the women dried berries and meat, digged sago lilies. Fishing was very good. Not only did our Heavenly Father love and provide these things for the Indians, but he watched over and provided for our pioneers. There were patches of wild roses dotting along the hills to the creek, and on either side of the place where we crossed the creek was a nice path of green grass and a grove of trees. The young men cleared the underbrush away and made swings and merry-go-rounds and had their celebrations there. Others soon found their way into the valley, both on the east and west side. In 1863, a ward was organized, with Chauncey Warner Porter, the eldest brother, as bishop. The valley was named Porterville, as Sanford Porter Sr. was the first to move in.
About that time, Lyman got the contract to furnish ties for the railroad which was being built through Morgan, thus giving employment to several men, which was a blessing, as some of the families were very poor. Some of their meals consisted of parched wheat. They cut and dragged the timber with horses from the side of the mountains to the mill, then loaded it on wagons and hauled it to his home for inspection. Then they loaded it on wagons again and took it to Morgan. From the mill to Morgan was 10 miles. All the residents on the west side of Porterville were English converts, except one family who was Danish. One of the converts, Thomas Bruff, learned to make and burn brick in England. He soon commenced making and selling brick for a living. Lyman built the first brick house in Porterville, 8 rooms. John Present Porter built one the same size. Sanford Porter Sr. and several others built brick homes. 7 children were born after moving to Porterville. They were energetic, and it wasn't long until they had raised plenty of grain and hay, and their stock increased and did well. In just a few years, Lyman had a fine herd of cows, sheep, and a number of horses. After the sheep were sheared in the spring, the wool was washed and carded, many times on hand cards, and sometimes it was sent to Ogden to get it carded into rolls. Mariah and daughters would then spin it into yarn, then weave the yarn into cloth for clothing and blankets. One type of cloth they wove was called linsey woolsey. They also knitted the hose and socks, mittens, and gloves. Mariah knitted and sold a great many socks and mittens. When the older girls were married, the sheep were sold.
Lyman and wife were noted for their hospitality. Generally, relatives and friends, and at times strangers, stopped to stay with them, as well as the Indians. About 1868, there was a young man by the name of Joseph Gourley, who came to the home and told Lyman he had been sick for a long time and had come west for his health and was out of money and had to have work. Lyman said, "I can see you're not able to work, but you can stay with us and help with the horses when you feel like it, or until you get strong." He never was able to do manual labor, but lived as one of the family for 35 years. For some time he had sick spells, and Mariah would doctor and care for him as if he were one of her own children.
Before the settlers came into the valley, Chief Washakie's Indians used it as a camping ground and pasture while they went into the hills and mountains to get game for their winter supply. The squaws would dry the meat and berries. When the land was fenced, the chief sent an Indian who could speak English fairly well to make arrangements for a place to camp and pasture for their horses. Lyman would arrange for them to do this. He did this for 5 or 6 years. The last time the Indians came, he told Lyman the chief thought it better to go to North Idaho, but would like to bring the entire tribe in to visit their old hunting ground once more. So Lyman and his sons fenced the haystacks on a farm he had bought at the mouth of Norwood Hollow, as it would make a good camping ground, being next to the hills. Lyman made the chief a present of a fat steer, which pleased him very much. In return, he gave Lyman a well-tanned buckskin. The children were glad, as buckskin strings for shoes were the style those days. When Chief Washakie got ready for his band to go, he ordered every man, woman, and child who could ride to mount a horse and to form a line 4 abreast, about a half block from Lyman's home. The family stood outside as they all marched quietly by the house. There were about 200 of them, and it was a beautiful and impressive sight.
Lyman and Mariah went to Logan to do temple work for a few months right after the temple was dedicated in 1884, and made it a practice to go for 2 or 3 months thereafter. Lyman and his 3 wives received their second anointings June 18, 1885, in the Logan Temple. They were thoughtful of the poor and the needy and the sick. Mariah kept her little woven willow basket handy, and she would fill it with pie, cake, and other delicacies that were very scarce at that time, and one of the children would go either on foot or on our pony to some sick or needy one. They would say, "The more we sacrifice and give away, the more we have to give." They did much good, and many people enjoyed their hospitality. Along with the work, they had some good times. A group of their friends in Centerville would get together and buy oysters and crackers. The next morning, all would come to their lumber wagons and travel all day over the very rough roads, and get to Lyman's house at night, tired and dusty. While they washed, his wife would get the oysters cooking, then set a long table. Soon they were all eating and telling funny experiences and jokes on each other, and laughing and having the best time. Always a few relatives living close were invited to share the supper and fun. After supper, the wives would soon have the dishes washed. Then some would go home with relatives, and some would stay at Lyman's. When 9 o'clock came, they would have family prayers and all go to bed to get rested for the early start home. In April 1868, the Ward Relief Societies were formed. Mariah Porter was named president of the East Porterville Relief Society.
Lyman was the first in the county to experience dry farming, which was a success. June 1, 1874, a committee was appointed to meet with Morgan City regarding the building of a courthouse. Lyman W. Porter was one of the men named on the committees to act for the county. He also served as sheriff, selectman, and road commissioner, and also helped lay out town sites. Lyman W. Porter was ordained to the office of High Priest May 22, 1880, and set apart as a High Counselor by Apostle Franklin D. Richards. September 1, 1912, he was ordained a Patriarch in Morgan Stake by Apostle David O. McKay. He wrote a father's and a patriarchal blessing for all of his children. When he was 60 years old, he had cataracts come on his eyes and was blind 12 years. Then he had one eye operated on and regained his sight, but read too much and partially lost his sight again. In the spring of 1869, Lyman took a trip back to his old home in Independence, Missouri. Only a few of his schoolmates and their families were left. He had quite an interesting visit with the presidency of the Josephite Church. From there he went to Texas to visit his sister's family and brought her youngest son back to live in the church, as her husband had gone with Lyman Wight's followers to Texas in the early days. October 4, 1867, he married his third wife, Elizabeth Bailey. In the spring of 1870, he was called to go to Kanab with others to help and encourage the few who had settled there to get the water out on the land and get the crops in. As soon as his crops were planted, he took Aunt Lizzie and baby Addie and left for his mission, leaving Mother and his oldest son Lyman, 14 years old, and Grandpa to look after the affairs at home. They got along very well for about a year and a half. Then the cows began to die of a disease. The folks did all they could to save them, but to no avail. Mother was getting so worn out and worried with so much trouble. Father's sister had been sick for some time and had passed away. Father was then released to come home. On the way down to Kanab, an incident happened that made Father feel that the hand of the Lord was with them. They had quite a distance to go, and most of it was dangerous. After they had camped at noon one day, 3 Indians came to them. One of them said, "Heap hurry, bad Indians." As the Indians turned to go, Father stopped them and gave them a biscuit. Father was soon on his way, and as they were going, the Indians rode by the side of the wagon and beat their breasts and sang, "Mormon, give me biscuit, hungry me."
Father spent most of his spare time reading the church works, and so was well versed in the Bible. He was just as strict in obeying the gospel as he was in expecting his children to obey him. His 19 children all grew up to love the gospel. Most of them were married according to the laws of the church. The homes of his wives were close together, and the wives were always pleasant and agreeable. Their children grew up together, playing and working together. The older children weren't allowed to correct the younger ones, as that was the duty of the parents. We were taught while young that when they spoke, all must obey, so there was very little scolding or whipping in the homes. We were taught to always speak well of others or not speak at all. We were also taught that we all had faults, to respect everybody, to be friendly with all, but to shun those bad habits. After the Manifesto of 1890, Father lived up to the law. The council divided the property with his 3 wives, and Father lived the rest of his life with Mother. Aunt Sarah moved on a farm as her 3 children were old enough to look after the work.
The following poem was written by Lyman Wight Porter, entitled On the Underground in Kanab in 1887 or 1888. Dear wives and children, though far, far away, I always remember you when I come here to pray. And when traveling in sand or through cedars I roam, oh, how oft I have thought of the loved ones at home. And I have not a doubt, though at home you may be, you nearly as often have thought about me. And when any are sick and dark clouds do appear, oh, how often you sigh, I wish Father were here. Cheer up, my dear family, be kind to each other, brothers to sisters, and children to mothers. For something doth whisper, be faithful and firm, the prisoners shall go free, and exiles return. Dear wives and children, the place where I stand is in a small graveyard in a far distant land. And here is a mound that I plainly can see. It is a small grave beneath a green tree. Well do I remember, dear Lizzie, the morn when unto us a little Clarissy was born, and how soon from her body the spirit was free, and here's where we laid her, beneath this green tree. Uncle Sanford was here, you remember, I guess, and selected the place for her body to rest. It was hewn in a rock with a cedar close by, and here's where we laid her, Uncle Sanford and I. Well do I remember that we were alone, you being sick and not able to come. We soon moved away, and you never did see the dear little grave beneath the green tree. The tree had grown larger, its branches unfurled, as if to protect our dear little girl. It's near 17 years since we parted with thee. Your father in exile stands alone by the tree. This little small grave is not much defaced. The stones we laid on it remain in their place. The board at the head has begun to decay. I will place it more firmly before I go away. Dear Mariah and Sarah, how my heart it doth thrill when I think of those loved ones we have lain on the hill. Those dear little mounds that are washed by the rain, where Parley and Bertie and Jared were lain. Their dear little forms methinks I can see, and hear their sweet voices calling dinner to me. Or running and jumping as they used to do, when from over the hill I came to their view. And when you, their dear mothers, took such great delight, when you called to the children, see, Father's in sight. And then they would run to get a short ride, and what comfort it gave me as they sat by my side. But they were too pure for this wicked day, so the Lord he saw fit to take them away. Oh, with what sorrow our hearts it did fill, as we laid Parley and Bertie and Jared on the hill. But as we remember what the Scriptures doth say, that the Lord he giveth, and he taketh away. Our hearts they were comforted, and we all said as one, O Lord, give us grace, and thy will be done. There are father and mother, they are lying quite near, and grandchildren too, that all were most dear, and all in our turn it is heaven's decree. This came to my mind as I stood by the tree. Now do you imagine I am pining away? I'm as healthy as I've been for many a day. When you read this, no doubt you all will agree. I felt a bit lonesome, alone by this tree. Dear wives and children, if your bosoms doth swell, dry up your tears, for all will be well. And do not suppose, as you're thinking of me, that I am yet standing alone beneath the green tree. Now be of good cheer, and your duties perform, for I surely expect to be with you ere long, to enjoy your presence, if it be the Lord's will, and place tombstones to those we have lain on the hill.
Lyman wrote the following letter from Porterville, May 6, 1913.
Dear son and daughter and family, I received your most welcome letter and was pleased to hear of the new arrival, and all were well as could be expected. If you have not named him, it would please me if you would give him my name in full, as none of my children or grandchildren have it, so that my name might be perpetuated down to the last generation, and my blessing upon him. I promise him that the Lord will preserve him from the power of the destroyer, and that he may grow up in the truths of the gospel, and become a useful man in Israel, and an example of good in the community where he may live, that his parents and relatives may well be proud of him. I advise you to get a record book and keep a genealogy. The spring is cold and backward with drying winds. I was sorry to learn that Valette had a paralytic stroke. I trust she may wholly recover. I have been looking for a letter from some of them, but have not got one yet. Had my 80th birthday dinner yesterday. Some of the children were here, had quite a nice time. Wish you folks could have been with us. I trust we may all live the principles of the gospel of our Redeemer, and be faithful until we shall be called hence, that we may meet in family unison in the eternal kingdom of our Lord in due time. May the Lord bless and prosper you temporally and spiritually, and preserve the children from the snares and pitfalls of the evil one is my prayer and desire continually. Love to all. Father and aunt, we're all well.
Lyman Wight Porter and his first wife, Electa Mariah Kilbourne, were the proud parents of 11 children, 5 girls and 6 boys.
Lyman Ozias Porter was born September 23, 1853 at Centerville, Davis County, Utah, and was married May 11, 1874 in the endowment house to Ann Rich. She bore him 13 children. She died September 13, 1917, age 60 at Porterville, and was buried there September 16th. He died June 2, 1925, age 71 at Woodruff, Rich County, Utah, and was buried at Porterville June 6th.
Mary Mariah Porter was born November 9, 1855, at Centerville, Davis County, Utah, and was married May 11, 1874, in the endowment house, to her cousin Justin Rockford Porter. She bore him 7 children. He died September 6, 1930, age 76 at Porterville, and was buried there September 9th. She died November 11, 1922, age 67 at Porterville, and was buried there November 13th. Electa Elizabeth Porter was born March 5, 1858 at Centerville, Davis County, Utah, and was married May 8, 1876 in the endowment house to her cousin Joseph Rich Porter. She bore him 8 children. He died August 1, 1912, age 68, at Porterville, and was buried there August 4th. She died August 17th, 1942, age 84, at Porterville, and was buried there August 20th.
Alva Sylvanus Porter was born May 26, 1860, at Centerville, Davis County, Utah, and was married March 17, 1886, in the Logan Temple to his cousin Eliza Bratton Porter. She bore him 10 children. She died May 24, 1942, age 72, at Douglas, Cochise, Arizona, and was buried at Webb May 25th. He died August 3, 1938, age 78, at Douglas, Cochise, Arizona, and was buried at Webb August 4th.
Nancy Malinda Porter was born April 1st, 1863, at Porterville, Morgan County, Utah, and was married December 12, 1878, in the Endowment House to Moses Simpson Moffett. She bore him 8 children. He died June 15, 1940, age 82, at Burley, Cassia County, Idaho, and was buried there June 18. She died February 22, 1957, age 93, at Jerome County, Idaho, and was buried at Burley February 27th.
Joseph Smith Porter was born July 11, 1865, at Porterville, Morgan County, Utah, and was married March 29, 1899, in the Salt Lake Temple to Elizabeth Mariah Lambert. She bore him 4 children. She died March 22, 1940, age 65, at Salt Lake City, and was buried in the Wasatch Lawn Cemetery March 24th. He died May 13, 1949, age 83, at Salt Lake City, and was buried May 16th in the Wasatch Lawn Cemetery. Parley Pratt Porter was born August 26, 1867, at Porterville, Morgan County, Utah, and died there May 1, 1875, age 7.
Sarah Olive Porter was born March 20, 1870, at Porterville, Morgan County, Utah, and was married December 4, 1895, in the Salt Lake Temple to Fredrick William Hemming. She bore him 4 children. He died February 23, 1919, age 54, at Morgan, and was buried there February 25th. She died January 16, 1943, age 72, at Morgan, and was buried there January 20th.
Byron Porter was born March 4, 1873, at Porterville, Morgan County, Utah, and was married September 14, 1904, in the Salt Lake Temple to Mary Elizabeth Robinson. She bore him 7 children. She died June 4, 1965, age 89, at Clearfield, Davis County, Utah, and was buried June 8 in the South Morgan Cemetery. He died August 28, 1951, age 78, at Ogden, Weber County, Utah, and was buried September 1st in the South Morgan Cemetery.
Bertie Porter was born September 3, 1875, at Porterville, Morgan County, Utah, and died there September 15, 1880, age 5.
Hiram Kilbourne Porter was born December 12, 1878, at Porterville, Morgan County, Utah, and was married September 4, 1901, in the Salt Lake Temple to Adria Rich. She bore him 4 children. She died September 3, 1960, age 79, at Montclair, Essex County, New Jersey, and was buried September 6 in the Provo City Cemetery. He died July 28, 1942, age 63, at Provo, and was buried July 31st in the Provo City Cemetery. Lyman Wight Porter and his second wife, Sarah Catherine Emmett, were the parents of 3 children. Moriankimer Heber Porter was born May 8, 1868, at Porterville, Morgan County, Utah, and was married March 14, 1888, in the Logan Temple to Mary Jane Chapin. She bore him 7 children. She died May 14, 1917, age 46, at Nephi, Juab County, Utah, and was buried in the Vine Bluff Cemetery. Moriancomer married second Sarah Leolia Tomlinson, December 25, 1918, in the Salt Lake Temple. There were no children born to this marriage. She died October 8, 1923, age 57, at Salt Lake City, and was buried at Nephi in the Vine Bluff Cemetery. Moriancomer married third Jessie Ann Stoll, June 16, 1926, in the Salt Lake Temple. There were no children by this marriage. She died January 29, 1969, at Gridley, Butte County, California, and was buried February 1st in the Little Butte Cemetery at Rigby, Jefferson County, Idaho. He died March 31, 1952, age 83, at Salt Lake City, and was buried April 4th at Nephi in the Vine Bluff Cemetery. David Wight Porter was born April 7, 1875, at Porterville, Morgan County, Utah, and was married November 20, 1895, in the Salt Lake Temple to Sarah Ann Ashdown. She bore him 11 children. She died April 21, 1918, age 42, at Auburn, Lincoln County, Wyoming, and was buried there April 23rd. He died October 5, 1941, age 66, at Ryrie, Jefferson County, Idaho, and was buried October 8th at Auburn, Lincoln County, Wyoming. Jared Lyman Porter was born June 9, 1878, at Porterville, Morgan County, Utah, and died April 17, 1881, age 2, at Porterville.
Lyman Wight Porter and his third wife, Elizabeth Bailey, were the proud parents of 9 children, 5 girls and 4 boys. Elizabeth Adeline Porter was born November 28, 1868, at Porterville, Morgan County, Utah, and was married March 12, 1886, in the Logan Temple to Edward Enoch Juan Hunter. She bore him 9 children. He died November 28, 1931, age 81, at Salt Lake City, and was buried in the Salt Lake City Cemetery December 1st. She died January 11, 1919, age 50, at Salt Lake City, and was buried January 14th in the Salt Lake City Cemetery. Clara C. Porter was born March 5, 1871, at Kanab, Kane County, Utah, and died March 11, 1871, aged 6 days.
John Riley Porter was born April 14, 1872, at Porterville, Morgan County, Utah, and was married December 23, 1909, in the Salt Lake Temple to Maude Felton. She bore him 2 children. She died June 3, 1980, age 83, at Salt Lake City, and was buried June 7th in the Porterville Cemetery. He died May 9, 1923, age 51, at Salt Lake City, and was buried May 13th in the Porterville Cemetery.
Zina Porter was born July 2, 1874, at Porterville, Morgan County, Utah, and was married March 14, 1894, in the Logan Temple to her cousin, William Ira Porter. She bore him 8 children. He died October 18, 1933, age 73, at Centerville, and was buried there October 22nd. She died August 12, 1924, age 50, at Centerville, and was buried there August 15th. Rhoda Aretta Porter was born September 14, 1876, at Porterville, and died there May 11, 1890, age 13. Rachel Porter was born December 16, 1878, at Porterville, Morgan County, Utah, and was married June 28, 1900, in the Salt Lake Temple to Franklin Elias Smith. She bore him 4 children. He died July 24, 1917, age 45, and was buried July 27 in the Wasatch Lawn Cemetery. She died January 28, 1966, age 87, at West Jordan, Salt Lake County, Utah, and was buried January 31st at the Wasatch Lawn Cemetery.
Joe Bailey Porter was born January 30th, 1881 at Porterville, Morgan County, Utah, and was married November 28, 1907 at Morgan to Emma Alice Teek. She bore him 2 children. She died October 10, 1969, age 80, at Idaho Falls, Bonneville County, Idaho. He died January 26, 1959, age 77, at Driggs, Teton County, Idaho, and was buried January 29th at Victor. Brigham Ernest Porter was born March 17, 1883, at Porterville, Morgan County, Utah, and was married October 5, 1904, in the Salt Lake Temple to Edna Lizetta Bruff. She bore him 2 children. She died June 26, 1977, age 90, at Ogden, Weber County, Utah, and was buried June 29th in the South Morgan Cemetery. He died November 19, 1936, age 53, at Porterville, and was buried November 22nd in the South Morgan Cemetery. LeGrande Thatcher Porter was born October 4, 1885, at Porterville, Morgan County, Utah, and was married August 10, 1911, at Salt Lake City to Jeanette Kingdon. She bore him 2 children. She died January 7, 1954, age 66, at Salt Lake City, and was buried January 11th in the Salt Lake City Cemetery. He died October 24, 1953, age 68, at Salt Lake City, and was buried October 28th in the Salt Lake City Cemetery. The total known posterity of Lyman Wight Porter as of July 31, 1983. 23 children, 112 grandchildren, 318 great-grandchildren, 502 second-great-grandchildren, 210 third-great-grandchildren, 17 fourth-great-grandchildren, 1,182 total posterity, 504 total spouses of children, grandchildren, etc., 1,686 total posterity, including spouses.
His obituary notice appeared in the Deseret News of April 8, 1914, page 11, as follows.
Morgan, Lyman Wight Porter, 1847 pioneer, dead. Morgan, April 6th. The funeral of Lyman Wight Porter, who died March 31st, was held in the Porterville Meeting House April 3rd. Lyman W. Porter was born May 3, 1833, at Independence, Jackson County, Missouri. With his parents, he shared the early persecutions of the saints. In the spring of 1847, they started for Utah in the company under the direction of Charles C. Rich, arriving in Utah October 2nd of that year. The following year, they settled in Mill Creek, Salt Lake County, where they resided for a short time and moved to Salt Lake City. In 1851, he with his father's family moved to Centerville, Davis County, making his home here for a number of years. While residing there, he took part during the Indian troubles and later was called to go with Porter Rockwell to watch the movements of Johnston's army during the Echo Canyon episode. In 1856, he was called to go with others to assist the belated handcart company. In 1862, he settled in Porterville, where he has since resided. In 1867, he was appointed to preside over the Porterville branch. Under his direction, the East Porterville town site was laid out. He built the first brick house and made the first brick in Morgan County. In the spring of 1869, he resigned his position as president of the branch to go to Missouri to assist in bringing his kinspeople to Utah. Returning by way of Chicago, he purchased wagons, machinery, and cattle. For many years, he was chairman of the board of directors of Morgan's ZCMI, served several terms as county commissioner and as sheriff. He was a high counselor in the Morgan stake, until ill health forced him to resign, when he was ordained a patriarch. He is survived by a numerous posterity.
As descendants of these fine and faithful people, let us remember their strong, wonderful qualities and try to live our lives to make them proud of us.